Ahoy! Welcome to the Sea Captain Leadership Podcast with Phil Bender, where we help listeners navigate the uncharted waters of personal and professional growth. The Sea Captain Leadership Podcast is about sharing energizing stories of leadership development and the culture surrounding top-performing individuals and their businesses. We want to help you to take risks and build your vision by showing you how to break free of the boundaries that are holding you back. Today on the Sea Captain Podcast, we welcome my long-term friend, Laurie Baughman. Laurie is a graduate of the University of Missouri with a Bachelor of Journalism degree. Her early career started with smaller companies, including a startup public relations firm in St. Louis and a mid-size advertising agency in Kansas City, Missouri. Laurie took this experience to financial services, working in marketing and financial advisor recruiting. A little over a year ago, Laurie and I joined forces to begin producing motivational teaching materials for budding student leaders and entrepreneurs. Our book, our culmination of working together, The Voyage, was released this past April on Amazon. And we'll be presenting to students at the University of Missouri's Business School, among other places, beginning this coming fall. Welcome, Laurie. Great to have you on the Sea Captain Podcast. This is so much fun to do this with you.
Thanks, Phil. I've been looking forward to this. This is great. I'm excited about everything about this book and what it's for, and I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, it's so weird when you think about the story behind it, because one of the things with Sea Captain is it all starts with a story. And as we go through the book a little bit, you'll get a feel for what that really means. But let's maybe download a little bit about how this project started and how it, the genesis of it.
Well, when I think of that, Phil, and this is a word you and I used a lot through the process, is like synchronicity or serendipitous. It was when I think back on how this started, and I'm one of those people who think things nothing's a coincidence, nothing's random. And we were sitting around, I was with you and Lisa, and we were having coffee and just talking about life. And, you were being the coach that you are, you're asking me some questions on what I wanted to do. And I mentioned that I like to write, and you brought up this project, and it just kind of evolved from there. I just thought, when I think back on that, and, what I will say is that, I was at a point in my life, my husband had passed away suddenly 2 years before that conversation. And as part of that, I had made a promise to myself to say yes to things that came my way. New experiences, things that might scare me, things that are out of my comfort zone. And this was one of those. So when you brought up this partnership and this book, I immediately said yes, and at the same time was really scared about it. But I look back and I'm just really excited about what we've been able to do.
Yeah, it's really something when you think about it. In fact, to fill in a couple of the blanks, our discussion over coffee was about an interactive trip you did where you were hanging out with penguins, and
Yeah.
and I laughed at that, but I also at the same time said, "Man, that's cool. I actually am into that as well." And then the dialogue just evolved into stories about the sea captain brand, and then I remember saying to you, I want to put together something. I was a big fan of the movie Big Fish. Okay. For those of you who have rented it or watched it, it's about a father who tells big fish stories, travel and salesperson. I don't want to give away all the details of it, but it was very moving to me. And my grandfather was like that. And then of course the other was The Alchemist, which is a great life lesson type story, fable type story. So we had that conversation. And then, the last piece about it was, and I just want to over and over again go to that, the risk you felt you had to take here, because you were, in the beginning, kind of like yes to it, but also like, let's test it. Who knows what'll come of it, right? Maybe speak to that a little bit, if you would. Some of that
Sure.
risk.
Yeah, no, it was a risk personally for me to say yes to something like that. Whereas before, I might have said, oh, I can't. I can't. I've never done anything like that before, or maybe someone else might be better for this. I said yes because one, I was excited about it. I really, I think it was. There was a reason we were having that conversation, and that was brought up, and I did not want to say no to an opportunity to do something really that sounded really neat, and was interesting and exciting. So, like, while I was a little scared, I was also very excited. I was energized by it, and I went with my gut and said, yes, this is something I want to do. And you're right, we did, and it helped to know where you and I agreed to say, let's be candid with each other. Let's see how this goes. And if it's not going anywhere, we'll be honest. But and I, and it just kind of went from there. And I remember that first meeting we had, and I just think about that, and I'll just, the first topic we talked about, the very first meeting was grief.
Yeah.
And that first chapter we wrote was grieving loss, the hawk.
Yeah.
And that was one we kind of wrote together. We were still trying to figure out how this was going to work, but you shared a story a friend of yours had experienced and had written that down and sent that to me. And knowing that we had talked about The Alchemist and we wanted more of a fable, and I had not seen Big Fish yet, but I have since, and I highly recommend that too. But I just thought, okay, I had an idea of where I wanted to go, and I just kind of went for it. And for those who read it, you'll see a conversation happening between this person and a hawk, and how meaningful that is from my perspective, and getting some really important messages across. So I remember when I sent that to you, I remember hitting send going, gosh, I don't know what he's going to think of this. Like, oh, because, you could say, no, hawks don't speak. But they do in this book, and they did in my mind, and it was really important. And you seemed to it really resonated with you. And for me, that set the tone of, let's just keep going. Let's just see where we can go with this.
Well, and that's where, for the reader, to give some perspective, how we put this together was we just had a Zoom call every week for about 30 minutes, and we would turn on the record button and the summary button, and you sort of just interviewed me, and I just gave you some what I would consider to be what turned out to be about 21 leadership lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And then your charge was to take that and make it a story, make it about the sea. So it wasn't heavy handed like a lot of self-help books are, where they just flat out tell you what you should or shouldn't do. This was about, I wanted people to realize as they go through it that it's an experience. And God, did you do a great job of bringing that to life. And the first one was, grieving and grieving loss. And I've come to know through all my journeys that no growth comes without loss, that the stages of grief are the same as the stages of growth. And yet that's very challenging. And having gone through it at the level you went through it, certainly my friend Max, who went through it as well, it was he really did a tremendous job. And of all the chapters, that one, there were some others that were doozies where I had to shake my head a couple times going, where did you come up with this creative idea? And so, setting up the format of the book, each chapter has the main character, Ivan Verma, who is a sea captain. He's a legend. He's fictional, but he's a legend, and he's sharing stories with his granddaughter, Amberjack. Okay. Now she's about 20 now, and she's getting ready to go off to sea herself. And so we kind of went in with that premise, and that it was going to be about life lessons. The sea captain is getting older, and so on. But when you wrote the story, okay, you would write the story as we talked about, and then I would write an analysis. That's sort of the format of the book. So it's a story, then it's an analysis that I provide, and then there's some words of wisdom, if you will, at the end, and you'll see that as you go through the book. And the people who have read it so far say that that's one of the most valuable pieces, is all those elements to get working together. So let's talk about the creative piece, which was your responsibility in this. Talk about how you came up with some of these stories. The hawk was a good one because it was pretty set there. In fact, Max, the metaphor he used was a hawk with his brother. Okay. But what about some of the creativity that you used? How did you come up with this stuff? And don't say you smoked a bunch of weed, because that won't work with the listeners. But how did you come up with this stuff?
It's hard to say. I do have a creative mind. Like I said before, I think the hawk really set the tone for, okay, I'm just going to go for it. This is what you were looking for, and we knew we had a sea captain theme, and there's so much you can do with that. And so what I did, and like I said, I have a creative mind, or not, who knows what it is, but I would sit with it. Like you said, we'd meet and we'd talk about a concept, and I would sit on it for maybe about a day before I started thinking, and just really kind of either meditating or just thinking about it, and ideas would just come to my mind, and I would pay attention to those. I whenever something popped into my mind, like, oh, this could be underwater, or this could be, in the air, or whatever that was, I would write it down. And I just didn't ignore those instincts that came into my mind. And I would just explore them. I think I showed you once, I had just like piles of little notes
Yeah,
that
that's
I
right.
would, wake up in the middle of the night and I'd have a note by my bed, or I'd be, loading the dishwasher and something would come to me and I'd write it down, and I would just gather those, and I would just, I just paid attention to the inspiration that would come into my head, and really was intentional about when I thought about it, what popped up, and I would just go for it. And sometimes they were a little out there, but it worked.
It sure did, and it there were some funny moments too. I mean, as we were going through it, because the more creative. First of all, I have to honor anybody who's listening in today. You have to understand that this is not your normal day at work. Okay, you work for a financial services firm. You certainly, there's writing
Yes.
involved, and but not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily creative writing. And
No,
so this was really something where you had to test yourself. Um, Instinctively, creatively, and if there's a message to people out there, is really the voyage is all about, that is the risk you took to put yourself out there. Okay,
for
because there
sure.
there were some funny moments. I mean, when we were going through this, I always think about the Ivan Verma is the sea captain, but what was your original name for the sea captain? You remember?
Cas- Caspian.
Yeah, you almost can't say it with a straight face. Originally, Lori wanted the sea captain's name to be Caspian. I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, oh, so you mean like a Disney prince or something? I'm like, no, no, no. And we fought back and forth. Not fought about it. You kind of
No.
gave in, but we laugh about it periodically, because some of the names the that you came up, I thought were maybe a little creative.
Yeah,
Um,
whatever.
yeah, whatever, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. You
but
told
it
me to push it. You told me to
you
push the
did.
limit.
It's about the process,
Yeah.
and again, and our listeners know that I run a coaching firm, and I have a number of partnerships, including this one with you, and some days I think I'm like Shark Tank, because I get a bunch of ideas all the time that I do, but also come from people, and this is an example of when we did this for the University of Missouri, and we need to recognize the dean there, the business dean, who is just an innovator and a terrific force for good. The Balaji Rajagopalan, and also Gay Albright, who was very involved in this and still will be. But
Mhm.
they both they got it. They got what we were trying to do, and the whole thing started because they asked me to guest lecture, and I just didn't want to do a slide deck, and this is why we started this project. So you're a mom of three grown children. Okay, they live all across the U.S. How do your kids contribute to some of these lessons? Maybe was there any perspective there that you get from them?
I just, other than just thinking of them, I put one of the big lessons, I think, from this book that I would want someone to take away. And if it could be someone at that age of a college, or soon after college age, to be, is in being intentional about life. How do you react to things? And often, and you heard me say this, Phil, many times, really tried to put myself in their shoes. My kids are young adults. I tried to look at this from their perspective, as well as the students who will be, reading this as well. I just really wanted to provide information that I think would have been really helpful for me at that stage in my life. Most or none of this isn't rocket science. This is I look at a lot of this as gifts we all have inside of us, but it's just how we choose to approach life and leverage them. And I just, it's very much about intentionally living, intentionally addressing things that come our way from all directions. We'll all have a lot of things happen to us throughout our lives. But if, I did think about them and them being as, their young adult selves, how would this help them? How, and there's been a few instances where I've been talking to them and they're telling me about this or that going on in their life. And I'll be like, well, why don't you go to Faith versus Science?
Yeah, right. Go to
Yeah. Go get
yeah.
your book and look up chapter 12 or whatever. But I really just wanted this to be a valuable to that generation that I would really like to see read this book and kind of just think about life more intentionally than just reacting to everything that will get thrown at them.
Yeah, there's a lot of levels here that you're going through, but in particular, and I find myself doing the same thing. Boy, you ought to buy the book, and that you could answer, and like all of a sudden, it's a surrogate parenting tool. But but you're not wrong in that because one is and we did this purposely, is the delivery was from the grandfather, okay? Because grandparents are a gift, okay? They're pure in their love. They don't have the baggage of trying to raise you and get it right. And so their stories are, sometimes long-winded. My grandfather was very good that way, but the perspective, the punchline was always there. It always made sense. And you start to realize over time, oh my God, wait a minute, there's wisdom here that needs to be used. And so for those who grandparents or parents, quite frankly, listening in, that was the design. It was designed for young leaders to hear the wisdom without hearing the authority, without hearing the parent, if you will. And so it's not a surprise that's happening for you. Now let's talk more about vision here, okay? Because there's two things that came up here. Number one was after you wrote the book and um, together, you start to say, okay, where do I go from here? Obviously, you have a full-time job, but this is an opportunity for you, if at worst a side hustle, right?
Mhm.
But what's your vision for utilizing something like this?
Well, we've talked about this, Phil. I mean, I agree. I think you've said it too. I would, if we think of vision, and there's a term, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal for this book is required reading for every college graduate
Hmm.
or high school graduate. Start your life. This is a pivotal moment in your time. And, this can, just put you in the right mind frame to kind of go out and embrace your life. So to do this would be to, I'm very excited to introduce this to Mizzou, and we already have, and we've gotten a great response from the students who've we've been able to get it in front of there, and that's really exciting for me to see that response from the students. So, let's see where else we can take it. I personally think the sky's the limit here. I don't, we can have goals, but the potential's big. Reference to another chapter of the book. So let's go. I don't see any limit. I just think we should that's my vision.
Yeah, and so with that in mind too, because it was written for people to be proactive in their lives, okay,
Mm-hmm.
instead of reactive. You graduate from school, or I used to always use the phrase, "When were you at peak performance?" And most people, when I ask them in their lives, let's say they're in their 40s or 50s, they'll go back to when they were in high school or college. And my response is always after they share that, I say, why not now? Why not today? Okay. what's in the way of it being today? And so are you just reacting to life as it is at this point, or are you proacting? So your example, one of the things we talked about was you got to live this thing now. Now that
Right.
you now that you co-wrote it, one of the things I shared with you is, okay, got to live this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what does that look like? And it's still forming for you, but for you to be at peak performance right now
Mm-hmm.
at somewhere between 40 and 60. I'm not going to say how old. All right.
It's fair.
But but to be there, it's time. Um so what do you see for you based on all of this?
Oh, I just am excited about the potential. I'm energized by it. This goes going back to what you just said, live the book. I need to remind I wrote a lot of this, you wrote a lot of this. But I still have to remind myself sometimes I need to live the book, and I do. So it's even at my age, I have opportunities. That's why when I say I would love every college graduate or high school graduate to read this, you know, I think we all have a lot of these capabilities, and whether we're reacting a lot or being proactive, but if we can just intentionally be proactive. And I'm just really excited about it. I'm excited about where this can go. I'm using it in my everyday life, as you know, with some, different other things going on in my life right now. I'm going back to the book saying, this would be, what would Ollie in Visionary Risk have done, or something like that. Like, I really am also being intentional about living what is in the pages of this book, because I just think I'm that excited about it. So, I'm really energized. I'm motivated, and I will say, it's fun to hear from people who've read the book. A lot of people where I do my full-time job have read it. They're excited about it. They've kind of reached out to me, and it's fun to hear other people's reaction to it, and that just makes me feel really good
Well,
and
it's
excited.
and you should be, because it's such a deserved thing that you did. My I may have put in the lessons, if you will, but you made them come to life, and that is the real gift in this whole thing.
Great
Is
partnership.
Yeah, it really worked, and we had to stay diligent. It took us about a year, a little over a year actually, to get it all done. A shout out to our illustrator Reese Kirby, who we met, believe it or not, at Missouri, in working, waiting on us at our table. And she's a graphic design major, we found out, and we said, we might have a project for you if you're interested. And she did all the illustrations.
Another
Um,
serendipitous moment.
when you're paying attention to those things, it
Hmm.
really does play out, but you got to be paying attention. And as it says in the book, you only get one voyage. Make it count. Okay, don't sit on the sidelines. Make it count. There's a horizon line to pursue. Go for it. And I can't think of a better example than what Laurie Baughman did for this past year. I'm sure there'll be more to come. We've already talked about a couple of other projects. How, if somebody's inspired by the book, Laurie, how do they get in touch with you? How do they contact you to connect?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Laurie Baughman on LinkedIn. I have a Gmail address. Can I give that out?
Sure,
It's
absolutely.
it's Laurie B, LAURIEB 9363 at gmail.com. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear from you and connect if you feel so inclined.
Yeah, well, it's great to spend the time with you. Great job today. I look forward to new projects based on this. We have a system down for it now, so it makes sense. And also taking this act on the road to hopefully other universities, other companies, things of that nature. So,
Yep.
Laurie Baughman, everyone, great job,
Thanks,
and
Phil.
have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Sea Captain Leadership Podcast. If you found the conversation valuable, please like, share, and post a review on your favorite podcast app. To learn more about Sea Captain and its high performance coaching programs, visit us at seacaptaincoaching.com. The link is in the show notes. You can also follow us at Sea Captain Coaching on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening. Wishing you fair winds and a following sea on your journey.